Hey, everybody, and welcome to Learning from Smart People. I am your host, Rob Oliver, and I appreciate you joining me today. My smart person today is Chris Castanes. He is an award winning insurance agent, a speaker, and the author of You Are Going to Be Great at This, a humorous book on sales. He is also the president of Surf Financial Brokers since 2011, where he helps his clients with life and disability and long term insurance. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be
Absolutely.
here.
Uh, sure, I appreciate it. So let's start with this. Let's talk a little bit about your backstory. Like, how did you get to where you are today, please?
Wow, that's a long story. Got out of college in 1985 with a degree in business, NC State University, home of the pack, go pack, and had a really didn't have any job prospects. Uh, you know, just was kind of kicking around and got a job selling insurance door to door with a company that sold accident plans mainly out in very rural areas of North Carolina. Um, Loved the sales part of it, but didn't love the company or the process that they had. And it was kind of high pressure sales. When I say kind of, it was, and it was brutal. It was just, but you learn a lot about yourself. It was boot camp for sales, and you learn how to cold call, and you got out of your fear problems of your head and all that kind of thing. And but I hated the company and I just couldn't stand it. So I got out of it, got out of insurance completely, sold office supplies, went into retail, did a few things, got back into the insurance business about 22 years ago and made a conscious effort to learn different things. Went to work for some of the big companies out there and just picked up things from them a little bit at a time. And then about 10 years into it, decided to just open my own business and be a completely independent agent. And so that was, like I said, about 20 some years ago, 22 years ago. And now I'm, still selling insurance and still building up a book of business with some residual income and all that kind of thing. But at the same time, I've become a student of the game of social media marketing. Now we've had to make the pivot with the COVID and all that. So it's more or less a virtual agency at this point.
Okay.
And we do a lot of stuff over the phone. We just talk to people. I'm licensed in 6 states now, so we have people all over that call in rather than me having to go out and prospect. So it's a little different process. I'm still learning it as I go. And in the meantime, I had written this book on sales more or less as a bucket list item. And I was like, I just want to get all this out of my system. And it was kind of cathartic. And I threw in a bunch of stories, and it's not a motivational book in any sense. It's more of a, here's some real world examples, things that happened to me, so you don't have to go through it. And it's a little PG-13 in some parts, and it's got some dialogue that I did clean up, but it's still PG-13. So, when you're making a sales call and somebody threatens to pull a gun on you, you don't really get into the best language choices at that point.
Right. Although I would much rather have someone threaten to pull a gun on me on a phone call rather than on a door to door call. So,
Well,
yeah,
I've had it happen with the door to door. So,
um, I'm sure. So, talk to me about this a little bit, okay? Because a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, I mean, some people who are entrepreneurs go into it because sales is in their blood and they love to sell. But a lot of other people are getting into things because they're passionate about a product that they've created. But sales and marketing isn't necessarily their bread and butter. That's not where they cut their teeth. That's not their strong point. Are there some non PG-13 tips that you can share to say, like, hey, here for people who are looking to improve their sales, or people who are looking to, learn more about this, what would you give them as just a couple quick tips or quick
uh,
ideas?
you know, That's a great question. One of the big things for people who have never done sales is just learning how to go out and find people to talk to. That is a guy I used to work with years ago used to say the hardest part of the job was finding somebody to talk to. Keeping your pipeline full, learning how to keep your pipeline full, constantly networking, looking for referrals, just knowing how to play that game and work it from that angle can help you tremendously. The other part is just really putting on some Teflon coating and saying, you know what, there's going to be a lot of negativity and a lot of rejection, and I'm going to have to just plow through that. And you're going to have to go through a lot of no's before you get a yes. And there's a lot of people that just aren't, they get shot down twice and they'll say, well, I'll never do that again. And those are the people they need to just kind of calm down, let the process work, figure out what the process is. And, a great thing, for example, is going to like a Toastmasters meeting. Some people don't even like talking to people. How are they going to get into sales if they can't communicate well? Join a Toastmasters, learn how to speak in front of people and speak individually. It just all kinds of things. It's a little bit of getting out of your own skin, out of your own head a little bit with fear. And, I'm going to sound stupid if I say this way, or, it's just figuring it out, but it takes time. And like you said, there's a lot of people that are just naturally good at it. And a lot of that comes from when you're younger. When I was younger, I was out beating on doors, selling anything. We would sell seeds, packets of seeds, or magazine subscriptions, or whatever. People don't do that nowadays. And right. So, it's different, but that grooms you and that kind of gets you into that mindset of it's just one more door, one more handshake. Let's go meet one more person before we go home. Okay. It's just a nonstop going through it,
Sure. Okay. Work with me on this then. What is it that you're actually selling? Because to me, I think that I've understood this from kind of what you and I have looked at before, and that is you're talking about selling more than just a product. Am I correct in that?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're selling, first and foremost, you're selling yourself. That's what you've got to sell. People don't buy from big companies. They buy from the person who's sitting across from them. If they don't like you, they're not going to buy from you. I can't, I hear constantly stories about, well, I went to a car lot and the guy was just completely arrogant and I did, whatever, I can buy that car somewhere else. And they just got up and left. Valuable lesson I learned years ago. I was working for one of the real big life insurance companies, and they were always telling us how awesome we were. And we'd have these big rah-rah sessions and, and we were supposed to communicate that to the client, how great we are. And I went to a lady's house one afternoon and was talking with her. She was a little widow, and we were having this conversation. She had bought a policy from a much smaller company, and you don't want to like question that or make them feel defensive. I just said, well, that's a good company. They're a fine company. I said, what made you decide to go with that company? And she said, well, the sales lady was very sweet and nice, and she took her time with me, and she let me talk to my kids, and, she wasn't high pressure. And it clicked that this lady bought a policy from a company that really I wouldn't recommend, but she didn't buy it from the company. She bought it from the sales lady who was really just very good to her. And that's when I realized all that rah-rah and the big name company, and you can say you work for some big corporation, it doesn't matter. You've got to make sure that people like you, and you got to come across as sincere and honest and have some integrity. And, you can joke around a little bit and just build a little bit of a rapport. A lot of people call that relationship selling. It's not like you have to hold hands with them. It's just, hey, let's just sit down, and people can figure that out really quickly if they like you or not. And if they trust you, it doesn't take a lot of time.
Right. So, I mean, in that way, they become a customer of you. And if you move to if you're working for someone else and you move between organizations, because the relationship is built with you, there's a possibility of bringing your customers with you. Uh, and that, even for somebody like me who does speaking, I'm literally selling myself. I'm selling my own personal services. But you're talking about the fact that it comes down to relationships more than it comes down to product, product superiority based on your competitors. What's your reaction to that?
Well, yeah, I think it does. I mean, there's not in the insurance business, for instance, they rate the insurance carriers with alphabet letters, like this one's an A rated or B rated or whatever. This lady bought from a B rated company, and I'm selling from the mega A rated company, but she didn't care.
Right.
She that's not her concern. She wants to know, when I call that lady, is she going to call me back, or is she going to pick up the phone,
Right.
or is she going to tell me the truth? And if I walk in there and start telling them how awesome the company I have is, and I'm being kind of arrogant about it, I'm not going to make any headway with this person. So that's, it's you're selling yourself. We're always selling ourselves. Like you said, you're selling yourself trying to get speaking gigs, just any kind of job. A job interview is you're literally selling yourself.
Right.
When I'm selling insurance, I'm asking somebody to hire me to be their insurance agent. So, we're always selling ourselves, but even in our personal lives, anybody that's ever been single and went out trying to meet someone at a bar or whatever, you're selling yourself. That's the ultimate test right there is, hey, here's the job interview for you. Can I, one of my stories I tell in my book is how when I was single, the opening line that would work for me sometimes, once in a while, would be, I thrive on rejection. Can I buy you a beer? And you make it a win-win, and they're like, no. And I'm like, awesome. So,
nice.
And there again, that goes back to one of those things you can use in sales is just knowing how to, go through rejection. And there's plenty of it. So you might as well translate that into your job or other things too. And every once in a while, somebody will say yes or laugh, but
Sure. Do you have any comments on like sales techniques that work better for you? And I think this kind of flows from it. It sounds like part of the sales technique is that building rapport. Are there any other kind of techniques that you would talk about with that?
Well, one of my favorites is selling on the approval of others. So in other words, you always see people who give endorsements to deals or products or services, and they'll say, this is a great, well, that's, you're buying something based off the fact that Brad Pitt said it was good or whatever. But then you can also get in someone's head a little bit and say, hey, like if you're selling a home, for instance, you could say, your neighbors would love to come over to this beautiful patio for a cookout sometime, or, they're going to, your family's going to love coming and staying in that big guest room that's in here or whatever. If you can get it into their head that other people will approve that purchase, then they'll go, oh, okay. And what's the first thing you do when you buy a car is you take it out and you show it to your friends, and you want them to say, wow, that's a great car. You don't want to hear, man, you got a really bad deal on that one, or something. So you want the approval of others when you're buying stuff. And whether it's right there in front of you, or if it's just something in your head that you're thinking, yeah, I hope people will, think that this is a good choice on my part. Nobody wants to have their choices questioned.
Okay. And
so you want to think about that. And, a great example is like teaching a kid to eat their vegetables. I don't know how old you are, but when I was growing up, my mother used to always try to make us eat spinach and tell us about how Popeye loved spinach. When she was selling on the approval of Popeye ate it, so why aren't you eating it?
Sure.
So that's a whole other game, but it's a great way of looking at things. Is if you can figure out what is going to make someone go, my friends will like this, so therefore I will like it, or something to that effect.
Right. Okay. So I find this really interesting because you're talking about sales, and every time you talk about sales, you bring it back and you give a real world example that's about life, right? So your first one is sales techniques, and then you bring it into being single. And your next one is a sales technique that you bring into getting kids to eat spinach. How much of a correlation do you find between sales and just everyday life?
Well, they're together. I mean, there again, you're always selling something. I mean, I'm on here, maybe somebody will buy my book. I don't know, and you're on here doing, your business, and we're always, if I'm out in public, I drive around with a sign magnet on the back of my car, just with my website. So you're always selling. And if you're going to be selling, you might as well learn those techniques so you can use them in certain examples. One of the best sales lessons you hear sometimes is, you have two ears and one mouth, so you'll talk half as much as you listen. Well, there's a lot of times when people just need to shut up and listen,
Yes.
and that's one of those lessons I've tried to teach my daughter over the years. I've always said, the best lesson in life is knowing when not to talk. Let the other person get it off their chest.
Yeah. I think there's a second part of that, and that is there's a difference between not talking and listening. Okay. And one's a good first step, right? So don't talk, let the other person talk. But it's not about like formulating in your head what you're going to say next. There is a real need to focus on that person so that they feel as though they're being heard. And do you have a reaction to that, or you have any tips for how to make people feel as though they're heard?
Well, of course, the easiest answer to that is just to be a part of the conversation and interact with the person. If you're just sitting there listening and you're not really reacting, then they're going to go, wait a minute, this guy's not listening to what I'm saying. But the other part of that is also, I don't know if you've ever seen those memes where they show the guy and he's like, yeah, I'd laugh for 30 minutes at this guy's dumb jokes and I'm still waiting to get a sentence in,
Right.
So,
Yeah. No, I was thinking about more of it from along the line of when you're listening to somebody, but only for your own benefit. You're listening to them so that what are they saying that I can then turn into a hook to sell them something on, as opposed to having a genuine interest in building that relationship. Can you talk about the balance there?
well, yeah, I mean, the thing there is you want to get verbiage, is the way we were always taught in sales school. There again, if I'm sitting there with a client and I'm just talking and talking and talking and wanting to give all the features of the product, that's great, but that may not be the product that client needs. And my goal is to get them to talk, get them to open up and to tell me what keeps them up at night, what's the pain point, whether it's, I want to make sure that if my kids are okay, if something happens to me or something like that, you've got to listen. I mean, if you're not listening, then you're not going to find it when they make that little comment that opens the door for you. So I'll give you a great example on that one. Is I had a client years ago and he was just a confirmed bachelor. He was in his mid 40s. He was like, yeah, I don't need any insurance. I'm great, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, let me just, touch base with you every 6 months or a year just to see what was going on. He was fine with that. And sure enough, about a year later, I called him and all of a sudden he's got his adult special needs nephew. He's got custody of this guy because his brother died. And he's like, wow, now I'm, and he's just telling me this in passing. And I'm like, you really need some life insurance now. Now you've got somebody that depends on you to be there.
Sure.
And so just by paying attention a little bit and not just giving hey, how's it going? Just, give me a little bit of information here and I'll figure something out that I can,
Right.
And there again, it helps if you have a lot of things that a lot of arrows in your quiver.
Sure.
And one that'll fit that problem.
Right. Well, okay. Let me give you an analogy as well, and that is, in the doctor's office, who should be talking more, the patient or the doctor? It's got to be the patient, because they're the ones that have the symptoms. They're the ones, they know why they came into the office. They know what they need. And so the doctor needs to hear them share what's going on. And it's not until they truly understand what's going on in the patient's experience that they can then prescribe something to meet that. And it sounds to me like you're talking a similar thing in sales. It's not until you understand where the client is and what the client needs that you can truly figure out what is the best option to serve them. What's your reaction?
Well, the only difference there, and that's a good analogy, but the only difference is that the doctor has them come to him and say, here's my problem.
Okay.
Whereas I have to go out and find somebody and then go, what's your problem? So,
yeah. And you've got to say it in a way that's like, hey, what is your problem?
I'm like, you've got to, I got to sit down with somebody
Sure.
and have this conversation and say, sooner or later, you're going to die. What do you want me to tell your spouse or your survivor, family members or whatever? It's not like them coming to me and go, one of these days I'm going to die. So
right.
It's that extra step of me having to be that kind of annoying, obnoxious guy sometime and talk about things that people really don't want to talk about.
Sure.
There's a thing I call the fill in the blank system in sales. And it basically says the sentence is, I am saving up for blank. Okay. If you're selling something that people honestly are not saving up for, then it's going to be extra hard on you to sell that product. People are saving up for retirement. People are saving up to buy a car. People are saving up to put a down payment on a house. Nobody is saving up for their long-term care expenses. Nobody is saving up if they got disabled or whatever.
Right.
So that's where I have to make that extra step and go, you there, let's find out what your problems are now so we can fix them, rather than them be the patient and come to the doctor and say, my back hurts. I have to go and ask them, is your back hurting?
Got it.
In a different way.
Yep. Understood. And I appreciate the clarification. I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. You're talking about adapting and moving into a virtual environment, moving into social media marketing. Can you talk a little bit about some of the lessons you've learned there, or some of the, what have you learned in that process?
It's a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And, because, everybody's doing it. The barrier to entry into putting a Facebook page up is really, really low. As long as you have hands, you can make you a Facebook page. So when everybody is in that conversation and they all have their free Facebook page and their free Twitter feed and their free LinkedIn and whatever, then everybody's in there and it just is a lot of noise, and you're having to find out how to get above it all and keep yourself top of mind as much as possible. So if here again, I'm sure when somebody types in to Google, life insurance agents near me, they're probably getting every State Farm, Nationwide. Chris Castanes isn't at the top of that list, no matter how hard I try.
Sure.
So that's where it's hard. But at the same time, when I was in college, one of the things I loved was marketing. And I actually, studied a little bit more on that. And so it's just having to change from old school marketing to internet marketing, social media marketing, which is relatively new if you look at the last 12, 15 years. And then now we're looking at metaverse, and, I don't even know what that means. People are talking about crypto and blockchain, and I'm like, I've got a Facebook page, come on down and I'll put a really silly meme about something on there for you.
Sure.
And that's what I've been doing is I do a lot of, I tell people I'll speak for free if it's close by and you want to talk about something insurance related, long-term care or something.
Okay.
But if you want me to come talk to you about, sales or whatever, that's a whole other business. I do that too. That's a different website, a different Facebook page. So,
right. Well, okay. But here's kind of where I am, and I'd like your comment on this, and we're almost out of time. insurance agent near me is much more difficult to get on Google, but ranking on Google for my own name is a little bit easier. What are your thoughts about name brand marketing?
Um, your name is your brand. So when ask yourself, when people hear Rob Oliver, what do they think of first? Do they think podcast? Do they think speaker? Or do they think, like for instance, there was a guy locally here and he was a mortgage broker, but he was also got involved in some sort of multi-level marketing thing with these electronic stuff. And he was trying to get me to do it. And I said, I really don't want to do that. People know me as the insurance guy or the financial guy. I don't want them to have to go, well, wait a minute, now he's selling protein shakes or he's, what is he doing? Then you start getting question marks, like, well, is the guy selling insurance or is he selling cell phones or, and people, when they hear you're in sales and they mean well, but they go, well, since you're doing that, while you're out talking to people, how about selling this other product? And I'm like, because it's a coupon book, or something. It doesn't have anything to do with what I'm selling. So if I'm talking about insurance and stuff, then I can kind of get away with the fringes of other financial topics a little bit.
Sure.
But I don't want people to hear my name and go, I don't know what that guy does. He's got his hands in 15 things. And, even though I do have my hands in 2 or 3 different businesses, I keep the name and brand separate as much as I can. Just to make it easy, because there again, people are just got too much information coming to them. And it's really just a matter of positioning yourself and as your brand name. So you just want to make sure that your name is your brand and you keep it that way.
Got it. Well, we're out of time and we've kind of led to this. If people are looking to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Okay, so my speaking and book website is chriscastanes.com, and that's Castanes. The book is called You're Going to Be Great at This. And like I said, when I'm speaking to groups, I mainly talk about using sales as life hacks, and I give some stories about people pulling guns on me when I'm selling insurance and things like that. And you can contact me there. And then I've also have my insurance business is surffinancialbrokers.com, where we've, like I said, we've gone virtual there and really have pushed that social media part. We have a YouTube channel, which is we're starving for some subscribers right now, but we put I have a couple of videos on there, like, can zombies buy life insurance and things like that, just as a goof, make it a little palatable. A lot of people don't want to sit there and hear about the waiver of premium for 15 minutes, but they want to know if a zombie can get disability insurance. So
Nice. Cool. Thanks. I will put links to both of those in the show notes so that people can find you that way. And listen, Chris, thank you so much for being here. It is time for 3 questions to establish your humanity. Are you ready for these, my friend?
I hope they're easy softball questions.
So what are the 2 radio stations most likely listened to in your car?
Wow, that's funny. The first one is NPR. I started listening to NPR after 9/11, and just because it was just so much information and not a lot of opinion, and ever since then I'm just addicted to it. It's just totally geeky and it's interesting. And the other country, I'll say it's not a country station, probably Sports Talk.
Okay.
In my next, I used to. You ride around the car all the time. You can't listen to so much classic rock. So I had to start going to more conversational things on the radio. So I listen to that and podcasts, of course, and things like that. But yeah, mostly NPR and Sports Talk.
You got it. If you were stranded on a desert island, who is the one person you would like to be stranded with?
Oh, man. Okay. Well, if my wife is listening, I'll say her.
Hey, you know what? It's a very safe answer.
That's the safe bet, but if say it was just anybody from time and space, I would probably go with That's a good one. I don't really know. Probably like a historical figure.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Tsarina Alexandra from Russia or something. I don't know.
Hey, you know what? It's your desert. It's your deserted island. It's up to you. That's all good. All right. So, last question. You are in the Carolinas, and so when it comes to barbecue, what is your preferred style of barbecue?
Oh, well, of course, it's Eastern North Carolina style that's a little vinegary. As a matter of fact, I have perfected a method of making that in the crock pot, which is totally, verboten around here, but I don't have a smoker. So, so but Eastern North Carolina is what I was raised on. Unfortunately, once you come across the state line, they act like they've never heard of it. So, because I'm in South Carolina, but yeah, that's my favorite. In South Carolina, they have more of a mustard based kind, and so it's okay. Nothing against it, but it's just I like that vinegar based with a little smoke to it.
Yep.
Pulled pork,
So it's
coleslaw, Texas Pete.
there. You go. Well, so it's interesting, and I just know a little teeny bit about this, but you got your mustard based, your vinegar based, and your tomato based. They're kind of your, at least I see those three as kind of the trinity of barbecue, and it's interesting to hear who likes what style. Listen, Chris Castanes, thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate you sharing. You are indeed a smart person. And for all my listeners, I will remind you that when you stop learning, you stop living. Have a great day, everybody.